Today we're going to do something just a little bit different, and we're going to talk about learning using either Copilot or ChatGPT as your buddy to help you learn a new concept. And I'll be super honest, the whole reason I'm making this video is for my kids, right? They are high school, junior high, and so as they're trying to learn different topics, like I keep saying, hey, here's how you can use ChatGPT as a tutor. Here's how you can get more info from Copilot and use it to test yourself. And so what I thought was I'm just going to make this video. I'm going to make them watch it. Hopefully you're going to enjoy it as ways to learn. Along the way, we're going to look at some different tools. We're also going to just talk about some of the conceptual stuff that you should be thinking about if you're trying to help educate either just your kid, maybe you're doing homeschooling, or maybe you just want to learn yourself, right? There's a lot of really neat tips in here. Sound fun? Then let's just switch over to my desktop and take a look. All right, so the first one is, as a parent, sometimes the challenge is, especially with those younger ones, right now, as much as my kids now, but like they have to read a book and they need to talk about it. And so as a parent, you feel compelled to read along with them, right? I know my wife did this a lot, read a lot of the books along with them. So let's take a book like this, right? So the Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And so, I mean, I'll be honest, I read it like the night that it came out, way back before I even had kids, I think. I don't remember what year this was published, but yeah, it was a long time ago. And so, now that the kid is rereading it, he consumes it in chapters. And so he just finished chapter 5. And I'm like, all right, well, I mean, I've read the book. I know what happens overall, but I don't remember what happened in chapter 5. So I can either reread all of chapter 5, or this is where we're going to take advantage of Copilot. So I'm coming to hear him say something like, hey, my son is reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Finally. I read it many, many years ago. Like, he didn't really need to know that, but I thought I'd say it anyway. He just finished chapter 5. Can you give me a brief summary of chapter 5 so I can discuss it with him, please? And so look, you can see that's like, yeah, hey, in chapter 5, here's what happened, right? So tell me the title of the chapter. And then it kind of gave me enough of the story that, all right, I remember, like, this was, Harry's first trip to Diagon Alley. Like, cool. I kind of remember, all the wonderment, like all the neat stuff that he saw. And so there you go. Okay, now I'm kind of back into it. Now, weirdly enough, because I kind of got pulled in, Copilot asked me a question like, hey, do you remember my favorite parts? And so then I had to think about it for a minute, but one of the things I really loved about Harry Potter was the whole muggles, right? Like us non-magic folks and how they just lived beside us. We had no idea. But then I was like, wait, Shane, stay focused. Don't get lost in a rabbit hole. And so what I did instead is I said, hey, so I want to make sure, like, kids sometimes kind of, read a little too fast, aren't paying attention, they're watching YouTube at the same time. So it's like, hey, can you give me a specific detail so I can make sure that he's getting the important stuff? And so I was like, yeah, what you should do is you should ask him what was special about the wand that Harry ended up with. And I'm like, oh, that's probably pretty good. What was special about it, right? I didn't remember. It kind of gave me a hint here around it was tied to Voldemort's wand, but I didn't remember. So I'm like, hey, can you just remind me? And then it told me exactly what was going on, right? The whole thing that they were brother wands, and that, obviously I know that it plays into the story later. But there you go. Right? Very quickly, like in the matter of a minute, I was able to completely catch up. And so now me and the kid can talk about chapter 5. It's all fresh in his brain, and I've got the high level stuff to kind of be able to drive the conversation and to test his knowledge. So if you've got a kid that's reading a book and you're supposed to be following along, helping, discussing it with them, and you just ain't got time to read Harry Potter again, then go ahead and use this. Like, so far, every book I've checked, I've done it with my dorky Star Wars books. I've done it with, some random book that the kids have read, whatever it was. Like, it's got a pretty deep catalog here. And by asking specific chapters, I can really drill in. So there you go. There's your first tip. Let's use Harry Potter to go a little bit further now. So a lot of times, reading is one thing, right? So in the early years, that's all they've got to do. But then they have to start writing papers, right? And now it's really easy to say, okay, ChatGPT, write me a book, right? And write me a story, right? Write this out so I can be done. And that is a great way to cheat, and B, not to learn anything, and C, to produce something and be very terrible, right? Like if you just say, hey, write me a theme or, article or Word document on, whatever, like it's not going to go well. So a better way that we have seen is if you can work with the child to say, all right, so we've got to come up and explore the theme. But once you come up with one, let's use Copilot or ChatGPT as a sanity check, right? Let's ask Copilot, hey, does what I come up with make sense? And then we can kind of dig in from there. So one of the patterns that Brody from my team uses with his kids is this one right here. I'm reading book title and exploring different themes. I've identified, put the theme that you've identified as one of the themes. Does this theme statement support that theme? And then put in the theme statement that the kid has come up with, right? Remember, we won't want them to get this from ChatGPT or Copilot. We want them to provide it. And then say, hey, does this quote from the book support my statement? And then you plug in a supporting piece of information from the book. So once again, this is not cheating. This is a way to validate that you're on the right path, right? Like, I know about you, but like when I was in school, it wasn't unusual for me to take off on a test or a quest like this and find out that basically my fundamental theme idea was completely wrong. So even though I then had a theme statement that supported my theme and then the quotes, like it didn't matter because it wasn't a theme that the teacher cared about, you know? So you got to be, you know, that sanity check is really great. So let's give this a try. I'm not going to read this whole one to you, but I basically wrote it out. So you can always hit pause if you want to see it. But if we jump over to Copilot now, we can say, you know, when they ask me anything, we'll paste that in and we'll see what it thinks of what I came up with. And look, it says I did a good job. Yay! I was kind of nervous, right? Because I haven't read the book in a while and I kind of, you know, pulled that together. But so this is another way to use these AI tools, right? Because a lot of times, like what I'm trying to get my kids to do is to think of this as a tutor. It's an interactive thing. It's not search the internet and read a bunch of stuff and then just make guesses. Like, you know, go think through what you're trying to solve, have your thoughts, and then say, hey, does what I have to say make sense, right? Like if I had told it the theme was, you know, race cars, like it would have came back and been like, hey, there's not really anything about race cars in the book, so you probably have missed. So great tool here to augment your learning and just get that sanity check that the paper I'm not going to go write is going to, you know, be in the right ballpark of a good answer. Okay, I got curious, right? So I typed in something silly, right? So my buddy suggested I go with the theme of Harry Potter is about aliens and how they will one day take over their planet with their spaceships. Could I use that theme instead, right? So let's just go with something crazy and outlandish. I want to see how, I'm guessing Copilot's going to gently tell me no, right? And so there you can see it, right? Like it's like, hey, that's an interesting idea. So good job. No, but it doesn't really align. And that's the type of sanity check we're looking for, right? Making sure that like, is this thing I'm doing a good idea? So anyway, I wanted to test it out since I'd never tested a bad idea. So there you go. Anyway, next topic. Hey, remember while you're watching this, you're saying, well, how do you know to prompt it like that? How do you know to use these tools, right? I have a great Copilot training class coming up right here in October. It's Copilot Jumpstart. It's a one-day program where me and Daniel may take you through all of the intro to using Copilot for Microsoft 365 with Word and Teams and Excel and prompting with a Copilot and more complex scenario, integrating it with Power Platform, all of those cool things that you want to know. So if you're behind the curve on the AI world, then try our Copilot Jumpstart. Or of course, we've also got our on-demand AI course as well, Mastering AI. Okay, anyway, back to the video. Okay, so the next quick idea comes from Garrett, right? So Garrett is pulling out, like in his writing, he finds it's a sense like he overuses phrases too much, right? Or he's really trying to struggle with, you know, he just wants to say, that's cool, but he needs to say it in a more professional way, right? And so what he's done is he'll often use it kind of like a thesaurus or to find antonyms, whatever those were. I don't remember what that was. But he will use it there. So one of the ways that you could do that, you know, if you're thinking about kids' homework, right? Like, and this is back to Shane when I was writing, right? I would have a tendency to get hung up and say the same thing over and over again, right? So I kept saying Harry Potter and his friends. Like it's in the paragraph or the paper I've just written 25 times. Like, how do we say that differently? So what you can do here is we could ask our friend, you know, Copilot and be like, hey, I keep saying this, like what's other ways to make that same expression, right? It's the same, right? So I'm not asking it to, you know, do anything. I'm not having it write for me, but I'm just trying to get it to, you know, spark some thoughts, right? Like, so the trio, like I literally would have never thought of calling them the trio, but that's just a quick way to go and replace what I've written there. And if you're reading it and you've read about, you know, Ron, Harry, and Hermione already, like the trio, like that's going to click, like that's great. So this is something that I do a lot in my professional career as well. Like when I'm trying to ideate is I will just say, hey, throw me a bunch of video titles, for example. And I never use, I would say I probably never used one of its exact titles. But what I'll end up doing is this list of 10, I end up kind of turning it into amalgamation that then puts me on, you know, what I want the title to be, right? So it might be a combination of this or that. Or what often will happen as well is I'll get like, well, those are all terrible. So what I'm communicating that I want to cover here is terrible. So I have to like think about it more so that I can, you know, get my head to say the right things. So I get relatively decent answers here. So then when I combine them, I can get a super answer, right? So same thing here. This is a great idea by Garrett, right? This will improve my actual writing because I'm very repetitive when I do it. All right, Next idea. All right, so this is the next day, but I got done editing. I was like, you know what else would be really cool to show you guys is how the new ChatGPT advanced voice works. So it just kind of came out recently and I was playing with it and I kind of got like tied up and wrapped up in it. So it was very interesting to me. I think it's another great study tool. So what I'm going to play for you in just a moment is the about 2-minute conversation that ChatGPT and I had studying vocabulary words. So I said, hey, here are my geography vocabulary words. And when I was doing practice runs, I let it tell me what all the words meant, but I skipped the definition to try to speed it up a little bit. But here are my vocabulary words. Give them back to me in random orders. But what I want you to do is give me vague descriptions of what each one is so I can try to connect the dots. And as you're going to see as I go through it, I make some, stumble over my words. I know that's not surprising, but it handles that just fine. I interrupted a couple of times on purpose just to make sure that it can handle the interruptions. It does. So I poured out some answers. And on one of them, I'm like, hey, can you help me remember that one better in the future? Like, it's super interesting. Like, if you start to, step away from just, the mechanics of studying my vocabulary words, right? What my kids are terrible at because they, about 3-second attention spans before they lose it. But having an engaging conversation with ChatGPT about it made it kind of fun. And I learned some geography words. So let's jump over and check that one out. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How's it going?
I'm doing well. Can you help me study some geography vocabulary, hard for me to say, words, please?
Of course. I'd be happy to help you study some geography vocabulary. Which words would you like to go over?
Let's do plateau, mesa, delta, canyon, and island. And I know that you could give me the definitions back, but I don't want those right now. I think I know them all. So if you could put those words into random order and then give me a description that is pretty vague, right? Don't be too specific. And then ask me to answer and tell you what each one is. That'd be great.
Sounds like a plan. Let's mix them up. Okay, this landform is surrounded by water on all sides.
That's an island.
Exactly, that's an island. Here's the next one. This landform has a flat top and is usually found in arid regions, often with steep cliff-like sides.
Right, I think that would be described as a hill with a flat top, which would be a mesa.
You got it. That's a mesa. Next up, this is a raised flat area of land, often with steep sides.
Oh, it's a plateau because you've already given me mesa.
Right again, that's a plateau. Okay, here's another one. Found at the mouth of a river, this landform is formed by sediment deposits and usually has a triangular shape.
Oh, that's a delta, but I always struggle with that one. Can you give me a better way to remember that delta?
Sure. Think of the Greek letter delta, which is a triangle. A delta forms at the mouth of a river, where it splits into several streams or channels, depositing sediment in a triangular shape, similar to the Greek letter. Does that help?
That does. Thank you. All right, continue the quiz.
Great. Here's the last one. This is a deep gorge, typically one with a river flowing through it, known for its impressive and steep sides.
Oh, that's the canyon, right? The Grand Canyon.
Exactly. It's a canyon. And the Grand Canyon is the perfect example. Nicely done. How are you feeling about these geography terms now?
Much better. Thank you for your help today.
You're very welcome. I'm glad I could help. If you have any more questions or need a refresher later, just let me know.
So let's do a new topic here. Right? So we're going to hit the new topic button. And notice here I am choosing more precise. And basically everything that I'm doing so far in Copilot, I don't have a paid Copilot account. So everything is in the free or included version of Copilot. So nothing special going on here. But so the next challenge is, my high schooler is dealing with Spanish. Right? Trying to learn Spanish is challenging. And so this is another place where he might come in and, use the tool here, right? So for example, he might try something like, I'm currently taking high school Spanish 2. I'm learning the verb tener, right? Which you actually learned in Spanish 1, but it's a verb that Shane remembers, so it was helpful. Can you help explain the verb to me and help me better understand the conjugations, please? So we hit enter. As you can imagine, all your AIs are pretty fluent. And so here you can see, right, tener means to have in English. And so like this might be the first piece, right? We're not going to dig into it, but I know when I was learning, I really struggled with, the different, the pronouns, right? The difference between I, you, informal, like all that. So I point that out because if you are struggling, if like, I don't really understand the difference between tu and vosotros, I probably said that wrong, but then you could, break off and say, hey, let's have a conversation. Like that's not clicking in my head, and you could go dive in deeper there, right? So I'm assuming here he understands all that. But look, so there's the conjugation. So that's one of the first things, right? If you think about his test, right, he's going to have to understand those. So practicing those is a challenge. The second one, and it beat me to it, but the examples, right? That's the next place that we can often struggle is things like, yo tengo un libro. I have a book, right? So it's one thing to say, okay, I know that the I form of tener is tengo, right? T-E-N-G-O. Yep, I spelled that right. Good job, me. But then by putting it into translated sentences, because that's the second part of his quizzes, that's going to give him some good examples, right? And so it's helping there. And so then now what you could do is you could ask it maybe to challenge me a little bit, right? So how about something like, please give me an example translation using the verb so I can see if I get it correct. And so if we do this, then it should say, hey, here's a sentence for you, right? So I have a dog. Okay, now this is one of the places where Copilot is too helpful. So this one might be a better one to go do in ChatGPT. But look, tengo un perro. I'm pretty sure that's the answer, right? So we'll type it in, tengo un perro, and we'll hit enter. And surprise, surprise, I'm guessing we're going to have gotten it correct. Oh, and I had a typo, tengo us perro. Typos, right, as one of the things that gets the kids. So being very particular, not typing US, we meant UN. I didn't mess up on purpose, but that's very, very typical there. And so this would be a good way to practice. Like I said, though the only challenge here is if you're using Copilot, it's going to, want to be over helpful and suggest, right? So if we switch over to ChatGPT, right? So over here on ChatGPT, if we try something very similar, I need to practice translating the Spanish verb tener. Can you give me some basic sentences to translate with the different conjugations? I'm a freshman in high school for context, right? We want to make sure it's not giving me super advanced stuff, right? And I'd like 5 questions one at a time. So, yo tengo un perro. Well, we know what that one is, right? I have a dog. Seem right? That's correct. Tú tienes muchos amigos. You have many friends, I'm pretty sure, right? So I won't make you watch me try to remember my Spanish. It's been a long time since I've had it. But you can see that this is super valuable. And if you wanted to have it, give me English or go Spanish, right? You would just change the prompt. But I really like this style of I would like 5 questions one at a time or 10 questions at one at a time. So that way, my son gets into the zone with doing it, right? Like he's not, prompting and doing back and forth. We're just doing the questions very directly. And so to that end, let's start another new chat. Remember, you want to start new chats because I don't want my Spanish here to pollute my next conversation. So I'll jump back over here. And so let's do another one, right? So in his science class, he had to learn about the different types of variables. There's dependent and independent. And so I didn't remember what they were. So let's just kind of start the conversation there. In my high school science class, I'm learning about dependent and independent variables. Can you please explain them to me? Please use soccer analogies. So this is one of the things while it's writing here, like when you're getting explanations, you can always say, put it into some type of context you want. And so maybe, it's for someone who's really into Taylor Swift. Then you would say, use Taylor Swift songs, or, someone who's really into poetry. Can you make it all poetry related, right? Like, whatever your jam is, there's a great opportunity here. This is one of those powers that teachers are going to slowly learn to unlock over the next few years, is you can build customized learning plans, right, that are targeted at the person. So it doesn't have to be generic examples. No one likes generic examples. Make them super specific. You're really into, comic books. Make them comic book examples. Like whatever it is that clicks in your head, that's going to work. Because you can see, right, like now it's in here about, independent variables and dependent variables. And so, independent variables is how long does he spend doing his dribbling practice, right? And dependent variables would be the number of successful dribbles in the game. And so that hopefully starts to click when he's sitting in front of his test. He's like, man, 6 months from now in his final exam, like what was the difference? And connecting it back to soccer has got the best chance for him remembering. So now that we feel good that we understand this, we could ask it once again to test us. Please create me 5 multiple choice questions where I need to figure out the variable. Give them to me one at a time again. And so nice one here, right? We're going to get in there. And so it's even still using the soccer. And so we've got it's a word problem, right? Like I get a soccer player decides to change the number of hours they practice penalty kicks each week to see how it affects the number of goals they score in a match. What is the independent variable in this scenario? So independent variable would be what? Probably the hours they practice penalty kicks. So let's see, is that one of the options? It is A. So let's see if I'm correct. Yay, I got it right. Okay, so the next question here, like we're going to, see what is the dependent variable. And so let's get it wrong, right? Let's see what happens if I get it wrong. So we're going to say that the dependent variable is the weather conditions, which is not even up there, right? It's a really bad answer, but sometimes I make mistakes. Not quite. So you can see there, like it says, hey, here's the correct answer, which is dependent variable could change based on the formation moved or used. And so you could break out at this point. You could say something like, can you give me a deeper explanation of question 2? I don't understand that one. And let's see what happens here. See, so this is the beauty of it not just being a robot, right? I mean, it is a robot, whatever. But like I can break out. And so now, because I was really dumbfounded by that one, I could dig in deeper and get a richer understanding. Because that's what you want. You don't want to know you're right or wrong. But if you're wrong, like let's understand why we're wrong. Because we're trying to learn this stuff. We're not just trying to pass a test. Okay, so we'll stop answering questions there. But I wanted to make sure that we're seeing this, because once again, like this was literally something that him and I did in the living room about 2 weeks ago. So great way to really drill home a topic that, they, of course, Dad, I understand. Like, this was a way to make sure that he really did, because when he was done, I can be like, hey, how'd you do? Or I can go look at chat transcripts and see what ChatGPT and him talked about. All right, the last one is my favorite example because I use it all the time. So start one more. And so my kids would get these math worksheets, right? Once a week, you get like 25-ish questions, and they had to do them all at home independently, right? And it wasn't usually, right? It was next level math. So they were learning something in school, and this was kind of that like, hey, we're getting you ahead stuff, right? So sometimes they'd never seen those types of questions before, and so they would work to answer them, and then dear old mom or dad had to check those questions. So what I quickly found out was with good old ChatGPT, I can just take a picture and let it do the work, right? So I'm going to grab a picture that I've used before. This is a couple years ago, but that's all right. Or last year or whatever. So if we open this file, this is a actual picture, right? So if you do the whole sheet at once, it kind of gets confused. But if you do them one at a time, it's great. So here you can see that he had this, and he had to figure out the coefficients, and we can see that 6 is missing, right? Number of terms, 4, that looks right. Constant is 9, yep. Variables M, X, and Y. All right. So it was really just he missed the 6 here. But once again, maybe I didn't remember that at the time. So I gave ChatGPT the question here, and then I'll just say something like, can you help me with this problem? Did I get it correct? And so now it is looking at the picture. It's OCRing it. It figures out that it's got the box. And so then, it's pulled in the different pieces, right? So even though there's a bunch of extra words on the screen, it seems to do a good job of understanding. Look, I missed the -6. Womp womp. Number of terms, I got that right. Variables, I got that correct. And so there's just one correction. So this is Dad who had to check these once a week. Whew, super saver. Now, what I never did then that I wish I had done is, so say that, the kid was struggling with this, right? That same thing we just did with Spanish. Why don't we do that here? Thanks. Can you create me 5 questions like this to practice with? Please ask them one at a time. If I get it right, then move on. If I'm wrong, then let's dig into why. And so now what it should do is it should spit these out for me. And so there you go, right? So now I've got a very similar question, but different. And so this is going to challenge the kid to do it, right? And so if we do, I guess I'd try something like this. I'd do 1, and then I'd say that is 7, -3, and 8. Whoops, I did not mean to mess up, but there you go. Going too fast, which my kids are very guilty of. I guess they get it naturally. But so you can see that, once again, I need to structure it. Maybe I need to find a better way to make it ask it in simpler parts. Or maybe we should have said, let's only test the coefficients portion, So you might want to make it less complicated for them to answer like we did with a multi-choice, but you can't do multi-choice with math. But you get the idea, right? Like we can start to work through this. I will also mention that doing the math stuff over in Copilot, it's got a really bad habit of being like, hey, here's the answer in the auto suggestions. So just be cognizant. I found that with these, if it's the multi-choice, then you can use Copilot. But if you're doing things like the translations where I just had to type in stuff, or in this case, answer, math equations, the auto suggest will suggest those. So you got to kind of watch out for it. But there you go, right? These are practical ways. Like I said, I made this video just for my kids. I'm going to make them watch it because I want them doing this themselves. I want them to open up ChatGPT for themselves and have their own little tutor in their pocket, right? I know they'll be tempted to say, okay, well, just have ChatGPT write my term paper. They're going to do that about once before they get busted by the teacher and find out that, ChatGPT, while it wrote a bunch of words, it was super obvious that, Copilot did it, and they're going to get busted and get a bad grade, and then, well, they'll be grounded and bad things will happen. But using it to research, to practice, to get deeper, better explanations when they don't understand what's going on, that's the beauty of this thing, okay? And I realize that you're thinking, well, what does this have to do with us? Well, you as an adult still have to learn things, so you can use this. Like if maybe you're trying to take the PL 900 or the PL 200, those Power Apps exams, right? Why not use this as your study buddy to make sure, right? It knows about the exams, it knows what's on them. You can ask it to give you example questions and start to practice there as well. So thoughts, comments, do you really hate that I did this? Whatever you're thinking, leave it below. Or maybe you've got more tips, right? Like several of the tips came from people on my team that are using it with their own kids. Do you have other tips you want to share with people? Be sure to share those below. All right? And with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day.